Good morning again. This past Friday, November 10th, was the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht. It started on the 9th, it went overnight into the 10th. That was 1938. Kristallnacht was the state-sanctioned riot. Those things don't seem to go together, but they did. State-sanctioned riot in Germany, where the marauders went and broke into Jewish-owned shops and burned synagogues. And that's what most people know, and it was the bigger part of it. But that next morning, on November 10th, the Gestapo went around and collected up all the Jewish men of influence. It's a very broad term. Amongst those was my grandfather. His story is actually a little bit funny, which is a funny thing to have a funny story about this. He got a call early in the morning because his father-in-law had been taken up. And they said, "Get out of your house." And he said, I probably should. Where should I go? "Oh, I'll go to my father-in-law's house. They've already been there." And he did. And he wasn't found all day. And then later on that evening, his mother, a good Jewish mother, decided that her son needed his overnight bag. And it didn't occur to her that maybe the Gestapo was watching. And so she left her home and went to where he was. And yes, they followed her, which is how he got rounded up. So they rounded up these men, and they took them to Sachsenhausen. This is a labor camp on the outskirts of Berlin. It existed for quite some time. This was 1938, so still just a labor camp. But let me tell you what that was. So my grandfather never spoke of his past, really. But he had to write what I'm about to read. He had to write it down and submit it to the German government for reparations many years later. He said, "I was assigned to work in the so-called Klinkerwerken. These were outside of the actual camp and were reached by a forced march of about 30 minutes. The work consisted of unloading large brick blocks. However, since the available force far exceeded that needed for the task, some of us were also utilized to carry sand in our jackets, which for this purpose we turned inside out and tied the arms, and we were running back and forth with our load over 200 meters, and then another forced march back to camp. By the third day, I collapsed during the march back and had to be carried by my fellow inmates." My grandfather's cousin was also there, also wrote a memoir. This is his memory of what happened. Ernst Reichmann, who was being harried in a different group, could not stand it for long, the run in the clinker. He drops down, blacks out, and remains unconscious on the ground. Before passing out, he feels a couple of kicks and hears a sensitive SS man encourage him. "Man, what's the matter with you? The worst things that happen is that you die." His collapse served him well. His block elder did not send him back to the clinker. Instead of the works, Ernst was assigned to the creep commando. Who is this creep commando? Those with bandages, who are handicapped, old or sick, or designated by their block elder. Those were the Creep Commando. They walked through the camp from dawn till dusk, crawling nonstop for 8 hours through frost and snow. The stated purpose was to test different boot materials for the Wehrmacht. They do not move fast. They go around slowly, carefully, putting one foot before the other, and they're very cold. The pale and weak Ernst Reichmann is there too. I look for him every morning when this defeated army crawls ghost-like in front of us. It was my grandfather's experience. Obviously, he survived and got out, not unscathed. Emotionally, like I said, I never heard him talk about his past. Physically, from that forced march and those walks, the Creep Commando, his feet were permanently damaged. At the age of 29, he needed special shoes, and for the rest of his life, walked with a cane and in pain. Every year at Kristallnacht, I remember my grandfather and this story. And it's always impactful, always means something to me. But this year, it felt different. It feels different. Since October 7th, anti-Semitism is up 400%. The Jewish community of this nation represents about 2.4% of the US population and more than 60% of bias crimes. In this past month, someone punched a woman in Grand Central Station. And she said, "Why?" And her attacker said, "You're Jewish." Locally, so many schools, K through 12, around this region have reported finding anti-Semitic graffiti in bathrooms, hallways, and parking lots. Someone distributed anti-Semitic flyers in the Wolf Trap area. An apartment in Gaithersburg had anti-Semitic graffiti in its stairwell. In colleges around the nation. At Harvard, during a Gaza die-in, a Jewish student was surrounded by a menacing mob of students. And they did not let him run away. They groped him and shouted, "Shame, shame, shame," for being Jewish. At Cornell, a junior, Patrick Day, he was arrested for leaving hate-filled posts directing extreme violence against Jews. At Cooper Union in New York, Jewish kids locked themselves into the library to avoid an angry mob. I'm super concerned about what happens on college campuses. For personal reasons, I have a daughter who's a sophomore at college. I have a son who's a senior in high school and about to head off that way. I worry about them. But I worry for a different reason, a deeper reason. And that's what I was reminded of this past Friday. In 1933, when the Nazis came to power, the first thing they tried was a national boycott of all Jewish businesses. It didn't work. People were, "This is my neighbor, this is my grocer, this is my dentist. Why would I boycott them? Oh, they're Jewish? Meh, That's okay, they always have been. So the Nazis said, oh, we have work to do. And they started passing law after law and little things, not that little. Jews couldn't enter certain public spaces. They couldn't take certain public roles. They were prohibited from certain professions. But they did this incrementally. However, one of the first things in these step-up rules was to ban them from academia. The Jewish presence in German academia was heavy, had been until 1933. If you look at immigration patterns to the US, it's about then that all these German intellectuals came from Germany to here because they were kicked out of their jobs. But how did academia respond to this? Well, the non-Jewish professors had been suffused with cultured anti-Semitism, coupled with how the Nazis outwardly appeared at this time, which was somewhat rational. They had little motivation to oppose these anti-Jewish measures. So nobody did, and many actually supported them. It scares me to think that maybe our institutions of higher learning are biased. They can be biased. They can have opinions. Anybody can. Everybody should. But when they start acting as a they and putting other people as a them, I get nervous. This is not about the war in Gaza. As I've said before, and I will say again, that is a morally complex situation, and none of us should have moral clarity about it. It is far too complicated. But it's not about that. This is about how that conflict is giving cover, legitimacy, to anti-Semitic rhetoric and actions. For the first time in my life, living here for over 50 years, I'm scared. I'm scared to be Jewish. It's a weight I carry on my shoulders from the moment I wake up to when I go to bed. I agonize over the death and destruction. I agonize over anger and invective. Our shared scripture, which we just read, urges us to be friends, to be siblings to one another, to be strong and courageous, to keep unity through the bond of peace, to be sympathetic, to love one another, to be compassionate, and to be humble. We live our daily lives together. It's pretty fair to say everyone in this room loves somebody who is Jewish. We are each other's support. Let us be gentle with one another. Let us choose our words carefully. Let us unite against hatred. Let us be family. Let us be friends. Let us be a community. In this space, I am not afraid. In this space, I have comfort. I have friends. I have love. It starts here, and it can grow. Thank you.